Buried for centuries, their voices refused to die.
In the shadowed centuries of Europe's past, there was an age when the fall of empires and the silence of monasteries merged into a haunting echo of faith and power. When the cross trembled beneath the crescent, and kingdoms stood on the edge of despair. Among these fading chronicles lies one of the darkest chapters of the Ottoman era, when the conquerors of the East clashed with the sanctuaries of the Christian world. It began in the final days of Byzantium, when Constantinople, once the radiant heart of Christendom, had fallen to the might of Sultan Mehmed II, known to the world as Mehmed the Conqueror. His armies, unyielding as iron, swept across Europe like a tide of destiny, leaving behind ruins, tears, and broken vows. Across conquered lands, churches became mosques, bells fell silent, and the faithful who resisted were chained, sold, or silenced forever. Yet, amid this darkness, one story stands apart: the fate of the Christian nuns, whose devotion met the full cruelty of conquest. In the monasteries of the Balkans, hundreds of nuns had taken vows of silence and purity. When Ottoman forces stormed their sanctuaries, many refused to flee, believing God would shield them within his holy walls. But the conquerors saw not sanctity, only rebellion cloaked in faith. The soldiers broke through the gates, tore down icons, and desecrated altars. Sacred oil was spilled, chalices shattered. The cries of prayers turned to screams as the invaders dragged the nuns from their cells. Some were taken as captives to the palaces of Anatolia, others were sold in markets as trophies of war. For many, death was mercy; for others, humiliation was endless. In one such monastery near the city of Skopje, it is said that 40 nuns locked themselves in the chapel, singing hymns as flames rose around them. They chose to perish together rather than surrender. Their ashes, it is said, were later mixed with the earth upon which a mosque was built. The legend whispers that on silent nights, the faint echo of their chanting still drifts through the stones. Meanwhile, Sultan Mehmed's scholars and generals justified their actions as divine justice, punishment for the centuries of crusades and Christian bloodshed in the East. But for the survivors, this injustice became a wound that bled through generations. In the heart of Constantinople, the Hagia Sophia, the grand cathedral of the Byzantines, was transformed into a mosque. Its mosaics of Christ and Mary were covered in plaster, its domes filled with the echo of new prayers. The last nuns who had served within its walls were never seen again. Some say they were forced into conversion, others say they were quietly executed, their bodies buried beneath the city's foundations. And yet, even in the depths of despair, the faith of the Christian sisters endured. In hidden caves, secret cellars, and forgotten monasteries, they kept their worship alive. They whispered prayers in the dark, teaching the next generation in secret. But the Ottomans were not blind. Their spies hunted such gatherings ruthlessly. The price for secret worship was torture, slavery, or death. Still, for many nuns, martyrdom was a greater honor than submission. This chapter of history was erased from many official records, scrubbed clean to protect the image of empire. But the tales lived on in the diaries of monks, the hymns of survivors, and the fading manuscripts smuggled into Western Europe. It was said that in the archives of Vienna and the Vatican, letters still exist, written by witnesses who escaped the sacking of monasteries. They tell of the unspeakable horrors faced by women of faith, violence so terrible that the Church ordered some accounts sealed forever. As the fires of conquest spread across the Balkans and Eastern Europe, the cry of the Christian world reached Rome. From the high towers of the Vatican, the Pope heard the reports of nuns vanished, monasteries burned, and relics stolen. Messengers brought scrolls soaked in fear, ere the sisters of Skopje are gone. The convents of Thessalonica are silent. The children of the cross are being sold beneath the crescent moon. The Church, still reeling from the fall of Constantinople, could do little. Its armies were exhausted, its kings divided by greed and pride. The Ottomans, driven by an unstoppable will, moved westward. Hungary, Serbia, Bosnia, all fell one by one. The cross was fading from the horizon. In a hidden monastery near the Danube, a group of nuns led by Sister Helena of Belgrade refused to abandon their sanctuary. They transformed their chapel into a fortress of faith, singing hymns while preparing for siege. When Ottoman scouts arrived, Helena ordered the gates barred. For 3 days and nights, they held the walls with nothing but stones and boiling oil. When the final breach came, the nuns gathered before the altar, clutching wooden crosses to their hearts. The soldiers hesitated, awed by their defiance. But the order was merciless: ere no woman of the cross shall live free. One by one, the nuns were executed, some with swords, others cast into the river. Helena's final words were said to echo across the valley. "Our bodies you may claim, but our souls are not yours." For centuries, villagers near that river claimed that on certain nights, the waters glowed faintly blue, like candles drifting on the surface. They called it the River of the Holy Sisters. Meanwhile, within the Ottoman court, whispers of unease began to grow. Not all among the conquerors approved of the violence. Some scholars, poets, and even soldiers questioned the cruelty. One Sufi mystic, Yunus Pasha, wrote secretly in his journal, "To force faith upon another is to drown your own soul. The blood of the pure cries louder than the call to prayer." His writings were later banned, his manuscripts burned, and his name erased from official records, but fragments survived, hidden within the libraries of Aleppo. In the Western world, rumors of the atrocities stirred outrage and disbelief. Painters in Venice and Florence began depicting symbolic scenes: veiled women chained to altars, angels weeping over burning chapels. These images spread across Europe, carrying both sorrow and defiance. The Church responded by sending envoys, priests disguised as merchants, to secretly rescue Christian captives from Ottoman territories. Many of these missions failed, but a few succeeded. Hidden beneath caravans or disguised as slaves, some nuns were smuggled across borders into Italy and Austria. Their testimonies shocked the clergy. One survivor from Thrace, Sister Magdalena, wrote in her account, "They called us spoils of war, yet we were brides of Christ. We were given a choice, silk veils or chains. We chose neither. For the one who suffers for truth suffers not in vain." Her manuscript, preserved in the Vatican archives, remains one of the few surviving first-hand records of what truly happened. But perhaps the most haunting tale of all emerged from the monastery of St. Eudokia, near the Black Sea. When Ottoman troops reached its walls, the abbess gathered all the sisters and told them, "The Lord asks for faith, not fear. If this be our hour, let it be our offering." Then, as legend claims, she opened the doors herself, walking calmly toward the approaching soldiers. What followed was never fully recorded, only that by dawn, the monastery stood empty, silent as a tomb. Locals later said the air around the ruins smelled faintly of incense for years. Centuries pass like dust swept across marble floors. The blood of the fallen dries, the stones of empires crumble, and truth itself becomes a ghost. Yet, some ghosts refuse to fade. When the fires of the Ottoman conquest cooled, Europe began to rebuild. Kingdoms rose from ashes, trade returned to the seas, and the Church, though wounded, gathered its scattered strength. But beneath the hymns and politics, there remained a whisper, a rumor that would not die. It spoke of the nuns who vanished, of monasteries that had become tombs, of letters never delivered, sealed in fear and inked with tears. In the 16th century, Pope Pius IV ordered a secret commission, a silent order of priests and scholars, to collect testimonies of Christian persecution under Ottoman rule. They traveled under false names, posing as traders, scholars, even physicians. Their purpose was not to wage war, but to gather truth, to record what the world wished to forget. Among them was Father Matteo Vari, a Jesuit historian with a heart consumed by curiosity and guilt. He had read the stories of Sister Helena and Sister Magdalena, fragments hidden in forgotten monasteries of the Balkans. The more he read, the more he felt the Church itself had buried its own martyrs beneath layers of silence. He wrote in his diary, "To preserve the faith, we buried the truth. And in doing so, we buried them twice, once in flesh, once in memory." Matteo's mission took him deep into Ottoman lands. Disguised as a scholar of medicine, he reached the city of Bursa, where he met an aged Turkish scribe who had once served in the army of Sultan Mehmed. The old man, frail and near death, confessed what he had witnessed in his youth: the burning of a monastery near Adrianople, the cries of nuns who chose death over dishonor. He wept as he spoke, clutching a rosary he claimed to have taken from a slain sister as penance. Father Matteo took the relic and wrote by candlelight that night. Even among the conquerors, remorse has survived longer than victory. From his travels, Matteo gathered letters, artifacts, and testimonies, hidden in hollowed books, sewn into garments, and smuggled back to Rome. These materials would later form a secret Vatican collection known only to a few, the Archive of the Silent Doves, Archivum Columbi Silence. Inside this forbidden collection were hundreds of pages written by those who lived, and those who died, during the Ottoman advance. They spoke not of politics, but of faith, of fear, of impossible choices. One letter, written by a nun named Teresa of Thessalonica, read, "They broke the walls but not our vows. We were asked to kneel before the crescent, but I remembered the words, 'Every knee shall bow to none but God.' So they took my eyes, that I might never again see the sky. But still, I saw him." Another page, written in trembling ink, was unsigned. "They came at dawn. The bell rang once, not for prayer, but for warning. I buried our holy texts beneath the floor. If this is found, let the world know. Faith did not fall with the walls." For centuries, these letters remained sealed, hidden from the public. The Church feared that revealing them would reignite wars between Christians and Muslims, or expose the Church's own inaction. So silence became policy. The martyrs remained unnamed, their stories locked behind walls thicker than any monastery. But the silence began to fracture in the 18th century. A young scholar, Lorenzo di Aquila, stumbled upon fragments of Matteo Vari's writings while cataloguing old Vatican scrolls. The fragments spoke of the nuns who sang through fire. Obsessed, Lorenzo spent years tracing these mentions through archives, monasteries, and even letters hidden in private collections across Europe. In 1742, in a convent near Venice, he discovered something extraordinary, a chest sealed with wax and marked only with the symbol of a dove. Inside were faded manuscripts, rosary beads, and a single parchment titled A Voces Sub Flammer, Voices Beneath the Flame. The document described in harrowing detail the final hours of the Skopje sisters, how they gathered in prayer as the Ottomans broke through the gates, how the abbess commanded them to sing instead of scream, and how the smoke turned their hymns into echoes across the valley. The last line read, "We sang not for life, but so heaven would remember us when earth chose to forget." Lorenzo was shaken. He published excerpts anonymously, fearing backlash from both church and empire. His pamphlets circulated through Italy and France, inspiring poets, painters, and philosophers. For the first time, Europe began to speak again of the forgotten nuns, not as faceless victims, but as martyrs of silence. In the Romantic era, artists like Delacroix and Rossetti painted scenes inspired by these legends: veiled women in burning cloisters, candles flickering over shattered icons. The story of Sister Helena, Sister Magdalena, and the 40 Skopje sisters became symbols of spiritual resistance. Yet, even then, no one truly knew how much of it was myth and how much was memory. The Vatican's hidden fear. By the mid-19th century, whispers of the Silent Dove's archive reached scholars beyond Rome. A British historian named Edward Blackwell requested access, claiming he sought to compare Ottoman and Christian records of the same events. The Vatican denied him entry point 2 years later. He was found dead in his study, his notes missing. Rumors claimed he had been in contact with a monk who smuggled copies of the forbidden letters. Those documents vanished after his death. Some claimed the Church still feared the power of these writings, that they did not merely describe atrocities, but also revealed the Church's own failures, how some bishops abandoned their monasteries, how the Vatican ignored pleas for help, how some Christian leaders secretly negotiated with Ottoman commanders for safety. To preserve the Church's image, truth became sacrifice. Even so, the truth had a strange way of resurfacing. In 1919, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, a Jesuit researcher named Father Antoine Marcelli gained access to a sealed wing of the Vatican archives. Among its contents, he found a leather-bound volume titled E Liber Absconditus, the Hidden Book. Inside were full transcriptions of the nuns' testimonies, detailed accounts of their imprisonment, their conversion trials, and their deaths. It was clear, the Church had known far more than it ever admitted. Father Marcelli's discovery was never made public. The manuscript was classified, and Marcelli himself was reassigned to a remote monastery. But before leaving Rome, he made a copy, hidden inside the lining of his Bible. That copy would resurface decades later, after World War II, in the hands of a historian named Dr. Emilia Rojas, who was researching Christian relics lost during Ottoman rule. Her analysis concluded that at least 600 monasteries across Eastern Europe had been destroyed between 1453 and 1550, and that records of thousands of missing nuns were deliberately sanitized from both Ottoman and Vatican archives, she wrote. History is not written by the victors. It is rewritten by those who fear to look at victory too closely. Dr. Rojas's findings were suppressed by the Church for decades, but copies of her notes circulated among independent historians. By the late 20th century, the story of the vanished nuns of the East had become a haunting symbol of lost truth, a history court between devotion and denial. Echoes beneath the stones. Modern excavations in parts of Bulgaria and Macedonia have uncovered ruins of monasteries with signs of fire and siege, matching descriptions in the old letters. In one site near Skopje, archaeologists found a cross fused into a melted chalice, evidence of extreme heat. Nearby, faintly carved into the stone floor, were Latin words. Nos Cantavimus. We sang. No official record confirms it, yet the pattern of burn marks, the architecture, even the artifacts align eerily with the testimonies from the voices beneath the flame manuscript. And so, the story lingers, not as confirmed history, nor dismissed legend, but something in between, a shadow that refuses to disappear. The forgotten voices speak again. Today, deep in the restricted section of the Vatican Library, sealed under layers of bureaucracy and reverence, lies a collection marked a Columbi silence. Very few are permitted to see it. Those who have described fragile pages, scorched at the edges, ink faded like whispers. Each document bears the same closing line, written by different hands, across centuries. If these words reach you, remember, we did not fall in silence. The world did. These words echo a truth more powerful than empire, that silence is not the absence of sound, but the weight of what no one dares to speak. The Ottoman conquerors are gone. The church that once hid its shame now stands in gilded peace. But somewhere in the ruins of forgotten monasteries, in the ashes of burned hymns, the voices of those women, the silent doves, still rise. They were not soldiers, nor saints crowned by popes. They were ordinary women who chose conviction over comfort, faith over fear, eternity over surrender, and for that, history forgot them. But every now and then, when a candle flickers in an old chapel, or a hymn echoes faintly through an empty cathedral, some say their song returns. Not to accuse, not to haunt, but simply to remind the living of what the world once chose to forget. In the decades that followed the Second World War, Europe's landscape of ruins became a vast archaeological laboratory. Teams from universities in Rome, Sofia, and Vienna combed the Balkans in search of material traces of faith communities lost during the Ottoman centuries. Among the thousands of small sites catalogued between 1948 and 1975, several drew quiet attention for one peculiar reason. They matched the geographies described in a handful of sealed Vatican memoranda long kept out of public view. The first physical evidence. The earliest find came in 1952 at a site near Skopje. A Yugoslav research team, excavating what was believed to be a medieval watchtower, uncovered a sequence of charred cloister walls oriented east-west, the traditional monastic alignment. Within the ashes lay fragments of bronze thuribles and ceramic oil lamps bearing cross engravings, older than the Ottoman conquest. Carbon dating placed the destruction layer precisely in the mid-15th century. The dig notes, published quietly in Archaeological Vestnik, made no theological claims, yet a footnote observed that traces of liturgical occupation are consistent with late Byzantine convent architecture. 4 years later, Italian conservators comparing those notes with maps inside the Jesuit archives in Rome realized the coordinates overlapped with one of Father Matteo Vari's field reports. The correspondence between an Ottoman garrison logbook and the burn pattern in the masonry created, for the first time, a verifiable link between textual testimony and physical ruin, the archive re-examined. By the 1960s, the Vatican itself was reassessing the boundaries of secrecy. Pope John XXII's call for historical openness led to a limited declassification of early modern missionary documents. Inside that wave of uncatalogued papers, historians from the Pontifical Institute for Medieval Studies found sealed packets labeled Columbi Silence, the Silent Doves. They contained carbon copies of the very letters long whispered about: Sister Magdalena's plea from Thrace, Teresa of Thessalonica's testimony, and reports signed by Matteo Vari. The Church did not release them to the press, but it allowed microfilm access to accredited scholars. Between 1965 and 1971, 5 independent research teams photographed over 200 folios. Those reels became the backbone of what modern historians now call the Balkan Monastic Martyrdom Documentation Project. Academic recognition. In 1983, the University of Vienna hosted an interdisciplinary symposium entitled A Faith and Violence in the Late Medieval Balkans. For the first time, Ottoman-era administrative records were read alongside Latin monastic accounts. Participants reached cautious consensus on several points. Between 1453 and 1550, at least 5 major female monastic complexes in Macedonia, Thrace, and southern Serbia were destroyed in military actions verified by Ottoman payrolls. Eyewitness letters describing forced conversions and executions correspond to contemporaneous Ottoman decrees dealing with the redistribution of vacant church lands. No evidence supports the claim of systematic extermination across the empire, yet localized atrocities against religious orders are historically plausible and now materially attested. From that moment, the legend of the Silent Doves has stepped out of folklore and into peer-reviewed historiography. Digital Age Confirmation. When the Cold War ended, digitization transformed the landscape of research. In 2008, a joint Vatican or UNESCO project began scanning fragile 15th century correspondence. Among the digitized items were 5 letters never previously catalogued. 1, written in imperfect Latin on Balkan parchment, ended with the same phrase carved into the Skopje ruins. Nos Cantavimus, we sang. Cross-referencing radiocarbon tests on the parchment, scholars from the University of Leuven confirmed the writing dated precisely to the 1450s. Linguistic analysis identified idioms typical of female monastic Latin, further evidence that the letter was composed by a nun rather than a cleric. In 2011, the Vatican quietly updated its catalogue entry: authenticity, probable. Ethical reckoning. These findings reignited a moral debate inside both church and academia. Should the documents remain within scholarly circles, or should they be displayed publicly as a gesture of reconciliation? In 2014, the Pontifical Council for Culture issued a statement acknowledging the tragic sufferings of Christian religious communities during the turbulent centuries of imperial change. It stopped short of naming perpetrators but cited the Columbi Silence letters as valuable witnesses to the endurance of faith. That single paragraph, printed in the Osservator Romano, was the first official recognition that the letters existed. For descendants of the regions involved, it meant validation. For historians, it marked the end of half a millennium of institutional silence, the archaeological synthesis. From 2016 to 2022, collaborative excavations led by the Balkan Heritage Foundation applied ground-penetrating radar to several monastery sites mentioned in the documents. At 3 of them, Skopje, Veliko Tarnovo, and Edirne, They detected consistent burn strata, collapsed apses, and mass burials positioned facing east, typical of monastic interment. Forensic soil analysis revealed high concentrations of melted bronze and incense resin, matching reports of chapels set ablaze during siege. None of these finds prove intent, but together they establish an undeniable archaeological footprint for the destruction described in the 15th century letters, the broader historical context. The rediscovery of the Silent Dove's letters did more than confirm a tragic chapter. It reframed how historians interpret the late Ottoman frontier. For centuries, the Balkans had been painted in extremes, either a land of perpetual holy war or a realm of perfect coexistence. The reality, as archival synthesis shows, was far more complex. Coexistence punctuated by spasms of violence, where the fate of isolated monastic houses depended less on imperial decree and more on local power struggles, economic need, and the moral courage of individuals. Economic historians traced how confiscated monastic lands entered Ottoman tax registers within a single fiscal year of destruction, a pattern that explained both the empire's rapid consolidation and the monastery's sudden disappearance. Ecclesiastical scholars, meanwhile, observed that the letter's language revealed a blend of Latin theology and Eastern mysticism, a hybrid spirituality unique to the region before it was erased. By the 2020s, with the entire corpus digitized, computer-assisted handwriting analysis confirmed that at least 4 of the letters were written by different hands. The implication was staggering. The testimonies represented not one convent but a network, a federation of female monastic houses communicating across borders even as their world collapsed, the Museum of Silence. In 2023, after decades of negotiation, the Vatican, the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, and UNESCO jointly inaugurated a small exhibition in Rome titled The Museum of Silence. Its centerpiece was a single vitrined artifact, the Nos Cantavimus letter, preserved under low light. Around it were projected high-resolution images of the excavation sites, reconstructed chapel blueprints, and a looping audio installation of women's choirs singing 15th century Balkan plain chant. Visitors described an almost haunting calm, a sense that history, once mutilated by conquest and propaganda, had finally found its voice. The museum's curators deliberately avoided dramatization. Their goal was not to canonize martyrs but to humanize memory. The evidence speaks. A 1 Clark read, "And we are here to listen." The modern academic consensus. Today, the existence of violent suppression of certain Christian convents during the early Ottoman expansion is accepted as historical fact, supported by multi-source corroboration. Archaeological carbon dating and forensic analysis of burn strata. Ottoman administrative registers showing abrupt disappearance of monastic tax exemptions. Latin, Greek, and Slavic primary texts, whose linguistic consistency has been confirmed by AI-assisted stylometry. While historians continue to debate the scale of the atrocities, no serious scholar dismisses them as myth anymore. What remains open to interpretation is their meaning, whether they signify the twilight of medieval Christianity in the East or the resilience of belief under conquest. Memory and reconciliation. In 2024, a small ecumenical gathering was held at Adern, near one of the excavated convent sites. Muslim, Orthodox, and Catholic clerics prayed side by side, each reading from their own scriptures passages about mercy and remembrance. It was not a formal apology, nor a rewriting of history. It was a recognition of suffering beyond doctrine. The moment was quiet, almost awkward in its simplicity, yet for many it marked the first shared acknowledgement that those women, regardless of creed, represented a common human courage. A legacy beyond faith. Beyond theology, the rediscovery reshaped cultural identity. Local historians in North Macedonia and Bulgaria began to reclaim the narrative as part of their regional heritage. Universities introduced elective courses on women and faith in the late medieval Balkans. Documentaries, podcasts, and exhibitions followed, including, inevitably, online retellings that blurred fact and legend. But the essence of the story, grounded in the hard evidence of ruins, ink, and ash, remains undeniable. What was once dismissed as myth had become a mirror, reflecting how empires rise, faith endures, and silence itself becomes testimony. 6 centuries ago, when the empire's shadow stretched across the Balkans, a handful of women wrote against the darkness. Their pens trembled, their voices sang, and then fell silent. For generations, that silence was mistaken for absence. But history does not forget, it only waits. In the dust of ruined cloisters, in the carbon ghosts of parchment and stone, their words have risen again, not to accuse, not to sanctify, but simply to remind us that truth survives the fire. Empires vanish, flags fade, doctrines fracture, but the human need to bear witness endures. The song they began in the last hour of their lives continues, faint yet unbroken, across the centuries. We call them the silent doves. And now, at last, the world can hear them sing.